In the new year, China is back to its old tricks, spreading propaganda against India. This time it is a video put out by a reporter of the Chinese state media that shows Chinese military personnel unfurling their national flag. Beijing media claims that the flag was unfurled in the Galwan Valley, which was the flashpoint of a bloody clash between India and the Chinese army in June 2020. Indian army sources, however, say that this is nowhere close to where the violence happened. Independent digital forensics done by the India Today OSINT desk seem to suggest that it happened at least 1.2 kilometers away from the zone where the clash happened. Regardless, this has led to a big political war of words domestically, with the Congress demanding answers from the Prime Minister.
Did anyone really expect a different New Year gift from a country that has presented the world with nothing but human misery since 2020? As 2021 turned to 2022, just as the latest variant of China's global pandemic gift was assuming scary proportions, the Chinese government was busy pumping money into yet another propaganda video to taunt India. A video designated to mock just hours after troops from both sides exchanged sweets at one of the other friction points, reminding India and the world that no matter what else happens, Chinese propaganda cannot and will not ever stop. Amplified and trended by official Chinese cyber armies and state organs, the video showing Chinese soldiers unfurl a large symbolic Chinese flag somewhere in the Galwan Valley to the tune of Chinese military chants is designated to poke and provoke. 18 months after 20 Indian soldiers and by some accounts a greater number of Chinese soldiers were killed in a violent close-quarter combat clash. The video is only the latest in a stream of images China has selectively leaked since the June 2020 Galwan incident. Clips selectively leaked to show Indian troops captive, injuries to Indian soldiers, and a dominant Chinese army. Selective clips designed to show the opposite of what really happened. For instance, while the Chinese army appears to be brandishing the flag in an effort to suggest it is in control of the Galwan friction point, top Indian army sources have confirmed to India Today that this video is nowhere near where the violence happened and is in fact deep within the Chinese side. Low on fact, but high on mind games and poking innuendo. That's the Chinese brand of provocation. One top-level Indian assessment suggests that Chinese predilection with propagating falsehood about Galwan is specifically because of the damage suffered by the People's Liberation Army on that cold June night.
If a clear-cut examination of this video is done, it is all fake, and this has been made in their area where they are still in possession, being their side of the LAC, and they have depicted the facts and figures in a manner so that their soldiers and their population believes in this kind of video and their morale is raised.
But India's political atmosphere has meant that the slightest propaganda from Beijing is immediately pounced upon by Indian opposition parties.
Not an inch of our soil is occupied by the Chinese. This is what he's been telling us. So on what soil is this flag being hoisted?
Modi government is a weak-kneed government. I'm sorry to say, but we have a weak Prime Minister who refuses to utter the word China. Modi government has compromised on national security and territorial integrity of India. This is an unpardonable sin that no government has committed.
The provocation comes days after the Chinese renamed 15 places in Arunachal Pradesh. The government had then put out a sharp reaction, reiterating that the state of Arunachal Pradesh is an integral part of India. As another cold winter peaks in Ladakh, China's fresh propaganda effort confirms once again that a world battling a Chinese-supplied pandemic doesn't matter to Xi Jinping's government. It's power play and propaganda first.
Even though this point is way beyond the place where the confrontation took place, the Chinese are making it appear as if they are back at the same place. And not just this, China has also come out with a list of 15 places in Arunachal Pradesh that it has renamed on its map. With camera person Abhishek, this is Abhishek Bhalla in New Delhi for India Today.
The Congress-led opposition is attacking the Modi government for the flag unfurled by the PLA in Galwan. But an open source investigation done by the India Today OSINT desk suggests that this was 1.2 kilometers away from the site where the violence happened last year. So if this is relatively deep inside Chinese soil, then what is it that the opposition and the government are bickering about on this issue? The Congress is asking, why is the Modi government silent? Why is it that they can't even utter the word China? Joining me to discuss this and more, we've got GVL Narasimha Rao, Rajya Sabha MP of the BJP, Pawan Khera of the Congress is with us for a perspective from Beijing. I have political commentator NR Tenjing. We have Major General G.G. Dwivedi. He's been a military attaché to Beijing, understands Mandarin, understands the mind of the Mandarins in China. So he'll give us his perspective. I want to go across first to Pawan Khera to establish what is it exactly that the opposition is so upset about. This OSINT investigation done by Ankit Kumar looked at the satellite images, looked at where this happened on Google Map, and then went back to where this was vis-a-vis the clash that happened in Galwan last year. According to this OSINT investigation, the site where the flag was unfurled is 1.2 kilometers away from where the clash happened. In the manner in which the Congress has opposed the unfurling of the Chinese flag, it almost makes it seem as if they came into Indian occupied territory, unfurled the flag, and that the Indian army did nothing about it. What is it precisely that you're upset about? Pawan Khera first.
Rahul, a very happy new year to all of us present here on your screen. It's a series of lies, missteps, inaction by the Prime Minister of India. This started on the 19th of June 2020 with those famous words which haunt every single Indian. Na koi ghusa hai, na koi ghusa hua hai, na hamari koi post unke kabze mein hai. Those words, I'm afraid, will haunt me for every living minute of my life, because that emboldened.
Can we be more specific? China. Because one of the things the Congress is opposed is the unfurling of the Chinese flag in the Galwan Valley.
On it, if you allow me to
please, let's focus on that. It's 1.2 kilometers away from the clash site. Go ahead, Pawan.
Rahul, if you interrupt me mid-sentences, I don't think you'll understand what I'm trying to say.
Go on,
please have some patience. Thank you. So that emboldened China. They enter into Uttarakhand, destroy our infrastructure, go away. We don't utter the word China as the Prime Minister of India. They build villages close to the border in Arunachal Pradesh. We don't utter the word China. On the contrary, our trade with China this year, in 2021, last year, has gone up by 67%. All those apps that were banned, most of them are back. They rename villages. We don't utter a word.
But they're renaming villages on the Chinese side, Pawan.
Official.
Pawan, one second. In Arunachal, the list of names that they put. Sir, because you're getting carried away by rhetoric. No, Pawan Khera, I'm trying to pin you down to
something I don't want to name right now. Because it's the New Year. I don't want to attack you on the New Year. Please listen to me.
No, sir. I'm making a point. I'm making a point.
Please make your point after I finish making my point.
But they're renaming villages in the way they perceive those villages.
Boss, then you are the second man in India who will be giving a clean chit to China every second day.
The fact that we're doing this show suggests that we're not.
Why are you helping China?
I'm not. The fact that we're doing this show suggests that we're asking questions. You're making political points.
No, sir, I am sorry.
Mr. Khera, you're saying they're renaming Indian villages. If we want to rename Tibet or if we want to rename Beijing, we can call it what we will. How does it matter?
Mr. Rahul Kanwal,
yes,
would you allow me to finish my sentence?
Yes.
If you come to the rescue of the Prime Minister of India, I'll still grant you that.
I'm coming to
but
nobody's
please,
rescue.
Sake,
I'm just making the point that you're scoring brownie points with a political bias without being factual.
Do not come to the rescue of China, for God's sake.
Sir, you're not being factual.
Have some sense of nationalism, for God's sake, Rahul Kanwal. I didn't expect this from you.
Sir, you're not being factual.
You are standing with the Chinese today.
Okay, Pawan Khera, I think you've spoken too much. I must tell you this very clearly.
No, you didn't allow me to speak.
Because you're going off on a tangent, you're not being able to make a point on facts. I'm making this point to you. Pawan Khera, you're saying China is renaming villages. China is renaming villages on the Chinese side. They can call that village whatever they want.
Renaming areas in Arunachal, which is our territory.
Sir, they can call it whatever they want. It's our territory.
Fine, so you go on giving them a clean sheet.
I am not giving them a clean sheet. I'm trying to pin you down on facts.
If
they unfurl a flag on the Chinese side in Galwan, how does anything turn on that?
You think the government of India was wrong? What nonsense is this, yaar? कि उन्होंने रीनेम कर दिया, करने दो, तो गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया ने क्यों विरोध किया? फिर उनको भी बोलो मत विरोध करो. आप क्यों चाइना के साथ खड़े हैं राहुल कंवल?
Sir, I'm making a specific Pawan Khera, I'm making a specific point to which you have no answer, which is why you're making all the broadsides that you are. We have put out using satellite maps the fact that the map was unfurled. Pawan Khera, you haven't answered my question. Pawan, you cannot shout. Pawan, you cannot shout. You will answer my question. I am asking you a specific question. No, because you're not answering the question. We started by asking you a specific question to which you haven't answered. The map was unfurled 1.2 kilometers away from the clash site. If the Chinese army unfurls a China flag on the Chinese side of the Galwan Valley, what is your problem? Why don't you answer this question?
Mr. Rahul Kanwal, I grant you everything. आप सही हैं. चीन ने आज तक हमारे यहाँ पिछले एक साल में.
But that's a political broadside. That's not a specific answer.
This man just
doesn't listen. Carried away with rhetoric.
Are you all right? You need a break.
You need a break, Pawan Khera. I am totally fine.
No, sir, you need a break because you are losing your control. You are losing your sense. आप सुनने को तैयार नहीं
हैं। सर, चाइना अपने देश में झंडा अपना फहरा रहा है, आपको क्या प्रॉब्लम हो रही है?
चीन और मोदी जी के साथ
Why are you acting like Chinese state media? Why are you acting like Chinese state media? You are doing propaganda for the PLA. Is the Congress on the payrolls of the PLA? Why are you doing PLA propaganda? Oh, this is bizarre. Sir, you are doing PLA propaganda in the manner in which you are drumming up the rhetoric on what's happening. You, sir, are doing PLA propaganda.
Absolute foolhardy. I refuse to participate in a debate in which the anchor stands with China.
So you are standing with China by pushing Chinese propaganda, and I think our viewers can see through this. You are pushing the Chinese side. You are pushing the Chinese side. You are the one who's doing Chinese propaganda. Pawan Khera's fader goes down. He's spoken enough. He hasn't answered the basic question, which is that if that flag was unfurled 1.2 kilometers away from the clash side on what is the Chinese side of the Galwan Valley, then what is the problem? That is the question. Let GVL Narasimha Rao respond to all of what he's heard from Pawan Khera.
No, Rahul, the facts are very much evident. We should not get carried away by the propaganda of the Chinese. Why is the Congress party, not just now, we have seen this happen in Doklam, after that secret meeting that Rahul Gandhi had with the Chinese ambassador, which was not disclosed to the public initially, but when they were caught with that meeting, they had to accept that such a meeting took place. This has happened last year. You have shown, India Today had shown with all those maps, I was a part of those debates, what was the flashpoint, Galwan flashpoint, and what exactly is the no man's territory and which is India's territory and where this clash took place. I think Congress party is trying to act as a propaganda tool of the Chinese.
Okay, that's what I said to Pawan, but I must tell you something different. No, 1 second, GVL. Pawan got upset and he left, which is a different matter. But what the Congress should have asked, and it didn't, it got caught in its own trap. But what they should have asked is this: when Indian MPs attended a meeting called by the Tibetan government in exile, China sent specific letters to those MPs, and your government, sir, hasn't uttered a word against Beijing. If China is sending these kind of virtual démarches to Indian MPs who attended a meeting called by the Tibetan government in exile, it almost is as if you don't want to utter the word China and hit back. When Pakistan says or does something, muh tod denge, andar ghus ke jawab denge, etc., etc. All of that and more is the rhetoric the BJP puts out. Here you can't even seem to utter the word China and tell them to get off.
Rahul, that can be a point of view, but here in the statecraft, it is not important. You don't deal with every adversary in the same way, and that's a part of the statecraft. And grant that to the present government. In the last year, also we had forced China to really go back. There was not an inch of Indian territory that was ceded to China. The same thing happened in Doklam. We stood our ground for several weeks and months, but we never allowed us an inch of land to be ceded.
That's not entirely
but
true
the
either,
Congress
because
party,
after we
which
claimed
has some
victory
kind
in
of a
Galwan,
nefarious tie-up.
after we claimed victory in Doklam, the Chinese army has come back and made significant reinforcements, which are now facts on the ground, which we now haven't been able to push back on, and neither can we push back any longer. They've altered facts on the ground, which is what they did in Doklam, which is what they've done in Arunachal Pradesh. These are some of the points that Pawan should have said instead of getting caught in his own rhetoric and making it political. There are facts which
Rahul,
you need to respond to.
All the infrastructure build up, all this infrastructure build up that you are referring to, Rahul, clearly happened on the Chinese side. Even at the Arunachal border, they have invested in their side of the border infrastructure for several years, and our country had ignored it for decades. And certainly after this government came into office, I think we have increased expenditure on the border road infrastructure several fold, which is the reason why possibly this Galwan clash happened. But we have certainly not stopped building up our infrastructure, but we have certainly a very difficult terrain and also a huge expenditure involved. But this government is committed to building that so that we can really face adversity with China in future.
No, but when you're saying that we deal with different adversaries in different ways, you're accepting the fact that because China is because Pakistan is a smaller country, it's easier to, say bombastic things against Islamabad and say we'll smash your face, we'll pull out your eyes. And even if Beijing goes out and provokes, the Indian government is not just calibrated, very careful, it's almost as if they're not willing to push them back, and that is problematic.
No, that's not what I said, Rahul. I think you very well understand. Every country has a certain method of working. Every country has certain institutional mechanisms, and you deal with each adversary in the manner which best suits India's interest. You don't deal with every adversary or every neighbor in exactly the same way, and then that will be called a standard template. You certainly will deal with China in a different way. You build pressure on them. We have taken certain punitive steps after the Galwan clash. Certainly that had hurt China's interests, and we certainly ensured that they went back from the places they wanted to occupy as a part of that misadventure. But what lingo you use, what terminology you adopt, what language you use is not going to be standard vis-a-vis every country. You deal with every neighbor or every country in a manner that the experts consider the best way to deal with them.
Okay.
So
in the midst of all of this, you spoke
same
of
language to be
India's
used,
counter
same
moves
terminology
in
to
South
be used,
Pangong.
same tactics to be used.
When we went up the mountains in the dead of the night, caught the PLA completely by surprise, went and sat on top of their heads above the Moldo garrison and really shook the PLA to its core because they didn't anticipate such a counter maneuver by India. To counter this now, China is building up new infrastructure along the border, including a bridge over the Pangong Tso Lake in a place called Kurnak, at the narrowest strip in Pangong Tso. They're now building a new bridge. Sources in the Defence Ministry have told India today that this bridge is being built with prefabricated structures. It's meant to counter any August 2020-like operation by the Indian Army. when India captured the dominating heights on the southern banks of the Pangong Lake. Sources further say that the bridge will cut down the distance between Khurnak and the south banks from about 200 kilometers to 40 to 50 kilometers, allowing the Chinese to move in much faster if the Indian army were ever to attempt an operation of that kind. The 135-kilometer long landlocked Lake Pangong is divided between Ladakh and Tibet. The region has been witnessing tensions between the two countries since May 2020. I want to go across to General Dwivedi, who mercifully is not a politician and therefore can hopefully give us a more dispassionate view. First and foremost, the Congress seem upset that the Chinese army was unfurling the Chinese flag in the Galwan Valley, almost making it seem as if they came on the Indian side, stood in front of us and unfurled the flag. Satellite imagery suggests that's about 1.2 kilometers away from the Galwan clash point. But the fact is that the PLA and the Beijing government seems to be more assertive in sending out letters to MPs. Governments typically would have sent a letter to our embassy in Beijing, which would have come to the foreign ministry, not directly writing to Indian MPs. And I find it puzzling that the Indian government did not say anything about such abrasive behavior from Beijing.
Well, Rahul, firstly, always a pleasure to be on your show, and also like to wish you and your team and all the viewers a very happy new year. Well, rightly, I am not a political person, and I'll give you a very dispassionate strategic perspective as to what is the situation on the ground and what is Chinese strategy of gray zone warfare. So we need to go back a little to 2020. After the Chinese came in with a very clear aim, political and military. Political to give a very strong message to Indian political leadership, and militarily to change the status quo of the existing line of actual control to try and align it with 1959 claim line. Having said that, well, Chinese did not achieve what they intended to because of the very firm Indian response, but nonetheless, some issues have changed on the ground. First and foremost, they came in 3 locations which are contested, but which are not held. That is unoccupied territory in Pangong North Bank, Galwan and Hot Spring, and of course Dipsan. Now today, what is the situation and what is the Chinese strategy? Well, you know, on 29 August, we occupied Kailash range. That actually upset the Chinese calculation, and having served in this area extensively, I think that was a very strategic move which actually brought the Chinese a mellowed down approach on the negotiation table. So today, if we look at Pangong, well, their status quo has definitely changed. We are only patrolling up to finger 3, whereas erstwhile it was finger 8. Now that is one situation. Galwan, we could patrol up to 14 APP. Now there is buffer zone, that is 1.5 kilometer on either side of 14 APP. Now this flag, as I see, was definitely raised in the Chinese territory 1.5 kilometer away from the contested point. But what is the aim behind it? Aim is simple. Chinese are playing the mind games, that is the gray zone warfare. For that, propaganda comes first, and this is for the consumption of the local, for their own home community, that they are at least having upper hand in this area. But let's also look at it, how Chinese have played out the propaganda. Chinese suffered very heavy casualties. Figures cannot be foretold, but definitely they are more than what India suffered. But they only declared 4 killed and 1 regimental commander wounded. Again, is part of the grey zone warfare, psychological warfare.
No, but here's the problem, General Dwivedi, what you're saying is correct, and which is why Pawan Khera and the Congress need to be careful. There are questions that you can ask and pin the government down, legitimate questions, and then there is Chinese propaganda. At least we need to be able to distinguish between Chinese propaganda and reality. The specific question that Pawan Khera should have asked GVL Narasimha Rao is this, that we exchange sweets with the Chinese army at Demchok, at Bottleneck, which are areas where the Indian army was patrolling previously. Now the Chinese army is sitting at a place called Bottleneck in an area where the Indian army used to patrol previously. Instead of pushing back and asking them to go back where they came from, we're now exchanging sweets with them. virtually legitimizing their presence in a place like Bottleneck? Now, those are the kind of questions that the Congress ought to be asking without getting carried away by propaganda. And there I find problematic that if there are points of incursion where the Indian Army used to go beyond Bottleneck and patrol earlier, before May 2020, you are now exchanging sweets with them. Why are you legitimizing the illegal occupation?
Rahul, as I know, a lot of these areas are areas where both the forces have had access. So it's not that a large part of that area it does not has always been
so right now they're sitting there in a place like Bottleneck. In a place like Bottleneck, the Chinese army is currently sitting there. I'm puzzled, and I can't imagine why you're exchanging sweets with them if our case in the border talks is that they need to go back from there.
No, obviously, you see, that is an area where we also have access. No, both sides have access to. So the point where you, the points that you're referring to is areas both sides have had access in the past and they continue to have access now. I don't see any reason. We have never claimed that to be a part of Indian territory. We did not accept China's claim that this is a part of their territory.
General,
and both sides have been moving in that area.
That
remains like, an unsettled issue.
Sir, in Chushul, Mall, exchanging sweets, I understand. In a place like Bottleneck, Dame Chowk, do you find it strange that we are exchanging sweets with them, General Dwivedi?
Rahul, absolutely, because if you take a Datsun Plateau, the Chinese are at the Y Junction and Rakinala. They have definitely come forward in the, I would say, buffer zone. And secondly, it does give a incorrect message that places where we are contesting, I don't think we need to be in a Bonhomic scenario. We need to be tough and get the Chinese out from there, because what are Chinese looking at? They want to consolidate what they are gaining. And Chinese play double game. At one side, they are escalating, they are incremental, build up, and build up all across. Build up in the weapon system, build up in the infrastructure. And secondly, they want to also have good optics of exchanging sweets. So this is their way, how they go about it. In one hand, they are strengthening their position, and the other hand, they are trying to show the world, look, we are talking peace.
No, but this is bizarre. No, one second. No, you said something about Pakistan. I know Pakistan and China are not the same, but just imagine in a context separate from what we're discussing, that there is a piece of land which India claims where the Pakistani army is now sitting. You want them in the border talks to go back. These are operational matters which are in the public domain to the extent that we know what the talks are about. We know that we are asking them to go back from the Y junction, the Bottleneck. And while they're sitting there, we're exchanging sweets with them. I just can't imagine why this is happening. You said you deal with Pakistan and China separately, GVL Narasimha Rao, but this makes no sense at all. When you exchange sweets, you almost convey the sense that you're okay with their presence over there. Whereas we're not okay with their presence because those were areas the Indian army patrolled in the past.
No, Rahul, the issue of China and Pakistan, as I understand, they're two different, cannot be compared easily. Because with Pakistan, you have a clear LOC, line of control, which is, there is no ambiguity about this at all. With,
so when you say what you're saying, you're almost giving up, you're almost giving up the Y junction, you're giving up land till Bottleneck to PLA. When you're saying what you are, and when you do what you're doing. No, we are not giving up
anything. Area which has always been, no, Rahul, areas which have always been in Indian territory, every inch of that continues to be in Indian territory.
Okay, let me go across now to NR
I would repeat myself for the benefit
Beijing,
of the viewers.
Who's joining us, NR. Let's take the current issue. India is a boisterous, noisy democracy, unlike your country. And we saw some of that play itself out. But what I find amusing is that the PLA raises a Chinese flag 1.2 kilometers away from the clash site in Galwan, well inside Chinese territory, and you make it seem as if this is a big accomplishment. If you decide to raise the flag on territory that you control, what's the big deal? Why is the Chinese state media so excited? NR, welcome and Happy New Year to you.
Well, Happy New Year to you, Rahul. First off, I'm an American citizen and I'm an independent commentator. I appear on over 40 different international stations. So this idea that I'm representing China is not correct. In terms of the way Beijing sees it, I mean, on January 1st, New Year, raising a flag is, I think, something that happens everywhere. I'm sure it happened in India, and I'm sure it happened quite close to the border. I don't see this as something that's confrontational. Obviously, both China and India are playing nationalist cards. But, you know, in listening to what was being said, I think there's an inability to see the forest for the trees. China does not want to invade India. I'm certain that India does not want to invade China. There's no need for war. It would be better if these countries work together and try to get rid of this kind of colonial stuff of the past and go forward with a new Asian century. So I don't understand why each side is trying to say that they're representing the anti-Chinese propaganda, when in fact there really is no propaganda. It seems to be an internal political matter, which between the Modi government and Congress.
And if we were to accept, General Dwivedi, that this is propaganda, because it clearly is, and even if the opposition is falling prey to that propaganda, the fact is the Chinese are doing this psyops, and the Indian government on that score has been silent. Is that in the way that the information warfare paradigm is evolving, not just between India and China, but the world over? Do you believe the government's been caught wanting in its information warfare act? Like they simply don't know how to counter this Chinese propaganda. Either don't know or don't want to.
Well, Rahul,
to not put too fine a point on it, Rahul, I think you're being a little bit paranoid that this is some sort of psyops action. Raising a flag is not what I would call a psyops.
Now that's the problem. You see, Pawan Khera is now back with us. And our Tenjin from Beijing says raising a flag inside Chinese territory is not psyops. And Pawan, in the period that you were gone, we had a couple of very straight questions to GVL Narasimha Rao. One was on the issue of distributing sweets in a place like Demchok, in a place like the Y Junction, territory which the Chinese army currently illegally occupies. For us to be exchanging sweets with the PLA in that junction is completely unacceptable, because it seems to be legitimizing the presence of the Chinese army in that area. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is that when they're sending letters directly to Indian MPs who are part of a meeting with Tibet government in exile, the Indian government's been silent. So there are serious questions which the opposition needs to pin the government down on without getting sidetracked by flags being unfurled inside Chinese territory. I'm glad that Pawan Khera is back, because I don't want to get this year started on a negative note. So Pawan, we'll let that back and forth be on the side, but I will give you a full opportunity to make your point. Welcome back, Pawan.
Thank you for the opportunity, but before I start, I demand on behalf of my party an apology by you, Rahul Kanwal, to the Congress party for the words that you uttered, that we are on the payrolls of Chinese.
I asked you if you were. I demand
that first.
No, 1 second.
No, sir.
I asked you if you were.
Let me finish. Again, you are interrupting.
Okay, go on.
Let me at least finish my demand. After that, you decide whether you want me on the show, unless that apology comes for my party, not for me. I don't care what you say about me. But for my party, I can't hear one word of this nature.
Okay, let me just say this.
I don't need.
No, 1 second.
You don't need certificates by the BJP
as a politician, okay, Pawan, hear me out. As a politician and as a party. Okay, I'm answering because I have very little time left. I must answer because we want to come to the specifics and not get carried away by propaganda. Here's the point I wish to make. First and foremost, the Congress as a party and you as an individual are welcome to say what you want. Whether it is Chinese propaganda, whether it pushes their agenda or not, as a political party, you have the right to say it. And any suggestion that you've received money from the PLA is not fair. And I take that back, and that's not right. So I apologize for that. That's not the intention at all. Secondly, I would like that the Congress and you, because you're much smarter than that, be able to tell the difference between Chinese propaganda and where the Indian government has... No, now you must hear me out, sir. I did what you said, now you must hear me out.
Sure.
When we receive missives as MPs from the Chinese government, Indian MPs receive missives and the Indian government says nothing, that is problematic. When we exchange sweets in places where the Chinese army is currently on territory that India believes is its own, and we start legitimizing their presence over there by exchanging sweets. That is problematic. A Chinese flag unfurled in Chinese territory, proven by satellite maps, is Chinese propaganda. The point I was wishing to make and still wish to make is that there is a difference between what is problematic and what is propaganda, and the opposition and the government need to see through that. Go ahead, Pawan.
Rahul, I thank you for the apology issued by you to my party. This propaganda comes in response to a series of lies and missteps by the Prime Minister. That started on the 19th of June 2020. You apologized. You have a large heart. The Prime Minister is yet to apologize to this country, where he gave a clean chit to China. The entire world was aghast at the kind of clean chit that was given to China, and this, you call it a propaganda. China uses propaganda as warfare. So I don't think the Congress party should ignore. The Prime Minister is free to ignore. After all, he can't have the courage to name China. Congress party will not let this propaganda warfare pass. We demand from our government, please counter this propaganda. You can't just be dismissive. अरे तो propaganda है, अपने घर में अपना झंडा फहरा रहे हैं. अरे साहब, हमारे गांव, हमारे यहाँ अरुणाचल के अंदर आकर नाम बदलना, छोटा एक उनका small time official of the Chinese embassy, who's he to question our MPs, both the BJP and the Congress MPs, on the Tibet issue, on that meeting on Tibet? Who's he?
Now you're
and
talking.
Why is the government quiet?
Now that's a good point. That's a good point. That's a good point. Let GVL respond to that.
Let me.
No, 1 second. Now you made this point that our MPs go and attend a meeting of the Tibetan government in exile.
I will not dismiss the propaganda, because propaganda is a very essential part of warfare when it comes to China.
Rahul.
Yes.
Can I have my say?
Yes, sir, you must.
You see, who was dining with Chinese ambassador stealthily when there was a standoff at Doklam?
There was no stealthy
Why did the Congress party lie about Rahul Gandhi's meeting about Chinese ambassador? Why did Mr. Surjewala, who is your boss, who is the communications in charge, why did he lie to the country that there was no meeting?
Why did the Prime Minister,
no, you have to tell the people of this country, Mr. Pawan Khera, why did you sign, why did your party sign an MOU with the Communist Party of China? Were you signing up to participate in their propaganda?
What is the secret information that China has?
Is not Chinese propaganda and disinformation?
Why is the Prime Minister
but look at what you're saying
to the entire world?
Prime Minister,
even in the US Congress, there is a bill that was introduced to counter Chinese propaganda. The whole world knows Chinese indulgence, they indulge in propaganda and disinformation, and you are acting as a tool in their hand. Now, what relationship does Rahul Gandhi continue to have with the Chinese? And with the CPC, you must come clean on this, Mr. Pawan Khera. You continuously engage in anti-India propaganda. You indulge in anti-India propaganda. इसका जवाब दो ना.
चीन से डरते क्यों हो प्रधानमंत्री के?
Why did Rahul Gandhi secretly meet Chinese ambassador?
पास क्या है प्रधानमंत्री?
No, why did he meet? Please answer this now. Why did Randeep Surjewala lie to the country? No, you indulge in pro-China propaganda.
This is not. This is, you know. One second. When I see this clash play out, you know, when I see this clash play out, this is exactly what China wants. You know, this is how their propaganda activities are served, because the opposition is saying, what does the Chinese army and Chinese government have on the Indian Prime Minister? Now, this is exactly what the Chinese army would like. This is their dream come true. This is why they're doing their propaganda. But the point that Pawan made, and I want to ask General Dwivedi about this, information as warfare, that the Chinese are playing their propaganda, and opposition being opposition will naturally pick on that because it suits their political interest. You can't argue with that. That's what they'll do. They're in opposition right now. Do you think that we're failing in playing this game smartly enough, where if information is warfare, we're not being able to counter that information warfare properly, General Dwivedi?
Absolutely, Rahul. I think the Chinese are playing the information warfare, the gray zone warfare. That is their strategy. And three warfare basically are built upon propaganda. It's built on public opinion and legal situations. I think first and foremost, our political parties must come on the same page and understand that Chinese are playing the mind game, they are playing the propaganda. Second point is that we need to have very firm response. this game is going to go on for long. It's not going to end up anytime soon. The LAC is going to be active. Chinese are going to be on their ploy. And we as a nation need to respond both politically, diplomatically, and militarily. I think we need to have a very cogent policy rather than infighting. We should have a very stated policy. Then Chinese only accept one language, that is firmness. And we need to be firm. And that is upon the government and diplomats, how they want to convey the message. But army on the ground is very firm. And same should be a response diplomatically and politically. Rahul.
You know, I want General Dwivedi's to be the last words because he's been in the military intelligence, understands the Chinese mind, makes a very important point that this kind of bickering is exactly what the PLA wants, to see the government and the opposition at war, these kind of questions being asked. But the opposition, being in the opposition, will go out and try and find ways, right or wrong, to pin the government down. And that's where silence is perplexing. That's where actions like exchanging sweets in territories that are disputed are problematic. That's where not saying anything about our MPs receiving letters is problematic. What is not problematic is Chinese renaming some Arunachal villages. How does it matter? They can call it whatever they want. They can rename Delhi and they can call it what they want. It doesn't become Chinese territory. So that's not problematic, and the opposition needs to be able to sift between what's truly problematic and what is complete propaganda. We had a fiery start to the new year. I was hoping that we'll kind of glide gently into the new year. It wasn't to be. But this is an important story because there is a build-up. We're seeing that bridge being built across the Pangong. The Chinese completely shaken by what India did in August, September last year. The climb up South Pangong, so the manner in which we were able to occupy those ridges, the bridge is aimed at ensuring that such a mobilization by India next time meets a much faster response. Last time it took up to 72 hours by the PLA to respond to India's action. They want to cut that down. So you've got a real enemy. The enemy is across the LAC. That's the enemy we need to fight, not this sniping at each other. That doesn't serve anybody's purpose except the Chinese propaganda purpose, which unfortunately gets served when the government and the opposition fight in this fashion. But lots for the government to think about in terms of how it's countering Chinese propaganda, in its ability to deal with this information warfare. This information warfare is a reality. If the opposition finds an issue, it will hit at the government, as the government would have, as the BJP would have, had they been in opposition. So we can't ignore that PSYOPs and information warfare, a reality of modern day warfare, and the government and the army need to do a better job of countering it. There can be no question about that. GVL Narasimha Rao, Pawan Khera, General Dwivedi and Anartha Anjan for joining me on the first episode of The Newsroom. Thank you very much.